Blessed third day of these spiritual exercises, Wednesday of Holy Week, to all of you who are following our very abbreviated spiritual exercises. And today I wanted to cover a theme that is very central for the Ignatian exercises, which is sin and mercy and forgiveness. And the reason is that if we are honest with ourselves, we have to see that in our relationship with God, we often fail Him. And of course, that's no new story. If you look at the book of Genesis, we see that right from the beginning, that's the story, right? Adam and Eve rebel, sin enters the world, and we are all afterwards affected by that in a very dramatic way, even tragic way. So let's do that today. Let's do that now. We'll take 10 minutes in our prayer and go over this. And what we're really trying to do is to see how God has blessed us, to see how He's helped us. But we're also going to see as well what the reality of our response has been in order to take stock of it and to make the decision and also ask God's grace to help us to avoid those sins in the future. And we hope that as well, armed with a clear vision of ourselves and also a clear vision of God, a greater love for Him, that task will be easier for us, right? Armed with God's grace. So what I'm suggesting is something similar to what we did last year for those of the men who were on the spiritual exercises. We will look at the virtues that God has wanted to cultivate in us, and also then our failure to cultivate those virtues or our vices. So what I'm going to suggest, since we are in the whole dynamic of Holy Week, and therefore yesterday, right, we started with John 13, the chapters dealing with the Last Supper discourse, that we continue with that same thread, that same theme. So what I would suggest is that you read through slowly John chapter 15, which is the vine and the branches. So how do I suggest you do that? Well, go through it first slowly, but have in mind a conversation with God that has really two components, right? Two parts. And the first one would be to see where God wants to call me a friend, right? Which is what He says precisely in that chapter. I no longer call you slaves, I call you my friends, because I've revealed to you everything I've learned from the Father. So that's what we want to do. Like, Lord, you've been a great friend to me because why? Because you've done these things for me. You have cultivated throughout my life these different virtues, right? You've given me these different blessings. So, but we want to focus in this prayer more on the virtues that God has kind of built up in me. And I would recommend that you do this starting with your childhood. Kind of like do it in a chronological order, because it just tends to make things easier for us. Like when I was a younger boy, these were the virtues that God was kind of emphasizing in me and helping me to cultivate. In high school, it was these, or this, maybe the same one or two. In college, these, with all the challenges college brings, and as a young adulthood, and so forth, right? So I think that'll help you get a good read on where God is leading you, where He has led you, and see how long that takes you. When you kind of have gotten a handle on that, and on this prayer too, I recommend very much that you have like a notebook in hand, a journal, so that you can write down what your perception of those virtues is, and also the vices, right? So then in the second moment of your prayer, right, and once you've seen all those virtues and kind of thought about them and hopefully written them down as well, give thanks to God, right? Kind of end that first part of the prayer with the great and heartfelt thanksgiving to Jesus. And then see too, well, and this will perhaps become part of your dynamic of praying, maybe as you look at, my stage in high school or college or something, and I see the virtue, I also become aware of what my vice was, or at least of the virtue that God was trying to cultivate in me that I didn't respond to, okay? So then you can also take some time to look at that, right? Because this is helping us be aware of how we are in front of God, what we have done to Him, how we've responded to Him. And then, of course, giving us a bit of a pathway of where we can continue to develop as Jesus wants us to develop, right? This whole idea of our retreat, of the 6-day retreat, being a journey in friendship with God, right? Which has its very positive aspects, of course, always coming from Him. And then it has as well the negatives, the honesty of, well, what has my response really been? So that's all I'm suggesting. You do that, right? Take some time, but always end with God's forgiveness, right? Try to see that, how He calls me to be a friend. He always forgives me. If you want, you can go to the story of the prodigal son. That could also help very much. To Luke chapter 15, verses 11 to 32. And you see how God, in the role of the Father, of that story, of that parable, always welcomes back his son. No matter how prodigal he's been, no matter how far off the map he's gone, he always welcomes him back. In other words, he always welcomes me back as well. Okay, so end with that forgiveness. And if you have any doubt about it, again, we're in Holy Week, look at Jesus on the cross, right? And even look beyond that to the resurrection, right? So he conquers sin, he conquers my sin as well. So then, for the final part of our prayer, of our exercise, will be to do some concrete act. And very simply, I would suggest for this, forgive someone. Forgive someone from your heart. Now, that can take the form of writing an email to someone that you haven't connected with in a long time. It can take the form of talking to someone in your household. It could take the form of a phone call. It could also be simply in your own heart, right? That's how you do it, that you forgive someone. Or maybe even as a result of your prayer, you, in a sense, come to a greater peace with God, right? As you see how you've reacted with him, how you've responded to him, and as you not forgive God, of course, but maybe forgive yourself, right? And look to him to provide greater strength. So that'll be let's say, the action item, and that will conclude, of course, your exercise for day 3 of these modified spiritual exercises of Holy Week.